Week 10 is underway. Our redraft and dynasty lineups are set. So, what more fun than to sort ourselves a couple of cheeky DFS lineups and win ourselves some cash money? We're going to start where we always do with our top game lines. And as you can see, Ed is still poorly sick. So, I'm joined by the fantastic Lewis Wood, Fancy Pancake, over here on YouTube. So, although this is not the top of the top game lines, it is second in honor of Lewis being here. We have gone for Rams 49ers. Lewis, they played each other 153 times. Who is leading the series, do you think?
I would love to say that I think it's the Rams, but I don't think it will be. The NFC West has always been this weird sort of absolute dog pile where the Niners always beat the Rams, the Seahawks always beat the Niners, the Rams always beat the Seahawks, and then everyone beats the Cardinals. So I think probably the 49ers will lead the series. They've been good for a lot longer than we have.
They do, but it is not far off. It's 79 to 71 and 3 ties. So it is not a huge amount in it. This game has the potential for points galore. So 10 out of the last 13 games, they're the games over the last 5 years, have ended with 40 plus points. However, the Rams did win a 12-6 thriller in December 2024. So there is a note of caution to be had here. I'm just not expecting huge amounts of things at quarterback from San Francisco. I've put Mac Jones in there because it looks like this lingering injury for Brock Purdy is going to rumble on. So it looks like he's going to be out again. It's not sounding great from the time of recording. Jones is deputized well, but he's not been consistent play for fantasy. So even at that value cost, I don't think I'm overly tempted unless I'm going to get cute somewhere and I'm spending up in all other places. CMC and Kittle, obviously, you want them in your lineups. CMC, regardless of being a tricky matchup, the amount of receiving work he is getting, he feels a little bit matchup proof. Kittle always has in him to have that big game. And I'm going to use that most reliable of fantasy stats. He's due one. So we're getting technical. So if you can factor them in, it's just the cost that is going to kind of make that a little bit tricky. CMC is averaging 9 targets per game. So regardless of the fact we are seeing one of his worst statistical seasons for rushing work so far, it just doesn't seem to matter because he's getting all the passing work as well. So he's always in a lineup or two for me. Looking at costs now, he has gone from being a weekly value DFS pick to finally kind of petering out at where seems fair. I've stuck Jennings on the list for wide receivers just because he's projected to have the most points. But it just feels, even at cost again, too much of a risk. 49's wide receivers through 9 weeks so far have combined for a grand total of 5 top 24 weeks. I've no idea when Ricky Pearsall's return. It's not going to be this week. If you're holding on to Brandon Ayuk, you're playing the long game. Shanahan said he's pretty confident he'll play this year. I'm not looking forward to that. It doesn't fill me with optimism. In short, I'm steering clear of 49ers wide receivers. Is that a wise strategy to take?
I would say so. I agree with you on the points so far. CMC, the Rams have allowed no rushing touchdowns on the season so far, but CMC is basically one of the only running backs for whom that doesn't matter because all of his production is coming through the passing game. The thing I'll say about Mac Jones is he was QB 10 against the Rams earlier this season in his top scoring fantasy game of the year, and in that same game we obviously saw Kendrick Bourne explode to finishes. I think it was wide receiver 2 on the week, maybe wide receiver 3, but had that explosive 150 plus yard performance. But to be honest, looking at the 49ers wide receivers, the difficulty is even then trying to predict who the receiver is going to be. We know CMC is going to get his. I wouldn't be particularly confident in starting someone else. Now, this is potentially where you can try and get a little bit different with a lineup of taking a top game line and taking your shot on someone, a lesser rostered player within an exciting matchup and within a potentially exciting offense. And the other caveat that I will add here, and as someone who obviously watches all of these games, Rams 49ers games get weird. They always get really strange. I just said Kendrick Bourne just had an 150-yard performance against us a few weeks ago. If there is a matchup where some random wide receiver is going to break out and then never be seen again, it's going to be this one. So, yeah, I wouldn't be looking to, throw that Mac Jones, Jawan Jennings stack into every lineup I'm doing. It's not a priority, but I might. But in potential would be more of a thing if I was still on DK. If you're on DraftKings, you can do sort of like 20-25 lineups. I might sprinkle in a few shares of Jawan Jennings in the flex somewhere or in my sort of wide receiver 3 slot because I can see it being an explosive matchup. It's just not something I'm particularly confident in. It's very boom bust with the 49ers receiving core.
The Rams do feel a little bit more predictable, desirable, likely when we look at those lines. But you're right. If you're going to put a few lineups in, there are certainly pieces on the 49ers that could get, and to win, you need at least one of those different pieces in there, don't you? So, yeah, certainly if you want to get different, there are some options in this game environment. The Rams, I'm very interested in Stafford, and that is something that I don't think I have thought very often in the last few years when it comes to DFS, but he just keeps producing this point. Would I like a Stafford, Nakua, Adams triple stack? Absolutely. That would be delightful for DFS. Can I afford it? Doubt it. But you'd have to get very, very cute elsewhere. You joined us for our Rams deep dive show pre-season, and what you said about Devontae Adams potentially having the value anyway, and potentially then being huge value when Nakua is out, is absolutely manifested. Stafford's just gone from being great value in DFS so far this season to now being fairly priced, similar to the trajectory we've seen for McCaffrey. Nakua is always in the captain discussion for Fantasy Game Day. To be fair, Devontae Adams should be as well, really, when you're looking at some of those. But once again, when you're saying about things could be different, could we see Adams vastly outperform Nakua? It's potential. Like, it's all on the table here. I will definitely have all three involved within lineups somewhere across. The 49ers are averaging just under 35 fantasy points per game to wide receivers. I would happily take the over on that in this matchup.
Yeah.
Kyren Williams, always an option, fairly priced. For me, I think there are other options I would prefer this week that are priced around him. Lower down in the pricing, for me, I'm not overly enthused by tight ends, but we shall put a pin in that because we're going to come back to tight ends for the Rams later on. As our Rams expert, where are you looking for DFS this week for LA?
Yeah, I think the Kyren Williams conversation is really interesting because it's very much a volume play. The 49ers are ranked 19th in fantasy points allowed to the running back position. And the interesting thing about Kyren Williams is that his biggest obstacle this season hasn't been Blake Corum, it's been Devontae Adams. It's been the increase in passing in the red zone. And Kyren Williams' touchdown equity last year was so incredible, meaning that this year as it's gone down, he's regressed. The Rams are normally quite easy for fantasy, for DFS, for any format, because it's so funneled between those top three. Matthew Stafford is having an incredible season, an MVP season, if I might say so myself. Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, Puka is seeing the volume, Devontae is getting the touchdowns. It's really as simple as that, but you can captain either of the two wide receivers and feel delighted about it. If it was any other player, I'd be quite happy saying pivot to a Stafford Devontae stack and go slightly different to the field. But with Puka Nacua right now, if you can afford to get him into your lineups, you probably should. You are really, if you go the other way, you're kind of betting on that chest injury being a little more serious than we think. But Puka plays through an injury in every single game. And like you say, with those lower value options, Tyler Higbee is seeing the biggest target share of the tight ends right now, but we'll carry on that tight end conversation a little bit later on.
If you are playing on Fantasy Game Day, however, in the UK and you have not played as of yet, then why not use promo code THFF1 to get one free play with your first paid entry. And then when you're looking to set your lineups, it's useful to then start to consider some options you may want to stack. So, first up, our first stack of the week comes from you, Lewis.
Yeah, so the first place I will always look to with stacks and then bring backs is over-unders. This is one of the higher over-unders of the week. And when I was starting to look through, okay, fantasy points allowed, let's take a look at quarterbacks and wide receivers. Bears-Giants seemed a really natural one to be targeting. And again, it's quite narrow at this point in time. Jaxson Dart provides the upside you want when looking at a potential quarterback, even playing naked, even looking at just playing on his own because of that rushing upside. We've seen 50% of red zone rushing share with Cam Scatterboo out, so there's a real potential there. But he has only had one game under 19.5 points in his 6 starts so far. He's been absolutely fantastic for fantasy football, and a huge amount of that has been 5 rushing touchdowns across those 6 starts. Wan'Dale Robinson is really sneakily an elite fantasy option, or definitely better than you think he is. He has the 14th highest targets on the year so far. I believe he's currently the PPR wide receiver 18. And with Malik Neighbors out, Wan'Dale is the only consistent part of that offense. If you actually take a little bit of a look at the target share, every single week it essentially devolves down to Wan'Dale Robinson and then everyone else afterwards. So he has 1 game since week 4 with less than 5 targets, and that includes 4 games of 7+. Obviously, the touchdown upside is always going to be slightly less with Wan'Dale Robinson because he is very much that pure slot underneath receiver. But if you can get a pick for 5,200 is not a huge amount, who can end with 14, 15, 16 fantasy points pretty consistently, that's someone that I would be looking to target, and then potentially looking for a bring back as well, which I'm quite happy to pass over to you for with a little bit of a spoiler.
Well, my stack of the week was going to be this. This was kind of in contention for me, and the exact thing. Looking at that game, if I haven't really appealed, so I've just gone the other side, and I'm looking at Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze. Now, I'll be honest. This is me trying to manifest something I want to see as well, because looking at the Bears, where we've got Zacchaeus, we've got Moore as well. Loveland, after destroying the lackluster Bengals last week, there's a lot of options. I would like to see Odunze have a bounce back game, so I'm going to speak it into existence. So I'm looking at Caleb Williams, who is reasonably highly priced. Coming off the back of that 38 points last week, do I think that's going to happen again? No, but he is in start of the week contention for me. The Giants give him the 7th most fantasy points against wide receivers and 4th most to quarterbacks. So that's what makes this appealing as well. Last week was odd for Rome Odunze. All of those points, if you hadn't watched the game, if you just looked at the score and thought, "Oh, what's Rome Odunze done for me?" you'd assume Sleeves hadn't updated when you saw there was 0 points on with all of that. 3 targets, no reception. He did absolutely nothing. It was like he'd gone home early because he thought, this is done. What is the point of me being out there? Hopefully this is a bounce back, because he did have 10 targets against the Ravens the other week as well. This just feels like it could be a get-right game for him. So, yeah, I'm calling this week that Williams will continue his run of form, that Odunze will hope to have that bounce back. When we're talking about those bringbacks as well, at the moment, Swift is still questionable. So I think Monangai is an interesting player to consider as well. He's in the start of the week mix for me again after what we saw last week. Will he do the same thing? No, because the Giants' defense are not as horrendously poor as I'm going to keep saying, Ed, if you're watching, horrendously poor as the horrible Bengals defense was last week. So, yeah, there's definitely several options in this game. It's an interesting matchup, and one that I think it's going to be far more interesting to watch than if we thought about this game at this time of the season in the preseason, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. These are 2 exciting offenses. And one thing that I'll definitely say about Rome Odunze is the Giants run man coverage at one of the highest rates in the league. It might even be the highest, which is interesting. And when you take a look at the fantasy points per route run and targets per route run, Rome Odunze's, they go up against man coverage, and the other Bears wide receivers, their metrics go down against man coverage. So it seems like the metrics are telling us that Rome Odunze is the best man beater in this defense, and if you're going up against a defense that plays man coverage more than anything else, that seems to be a relatively good combination to me.
This is why this is going to work as a perfect duo for the show, because I'm going purely off what I want to see happen, and then you back up my wishes and hopes with some proper analysis as well. So I now believe this is definitely going to happen. So you can plug this lineup in. What we're going to move on to next is what we call our secret stack. So our secret stack isn't secret because we don't want to tell anyone, because we don't want to all use it and win. It's a secret because unless it comes off, you're not telling anyone you played it, because it could make you look quite silly. And what I really like is you went for the exact same choice I had considered before pivoting. So we go to the Commanders, and honestly, Marcus Mariota just gets more and more handsome with age. Look at the old salt and pepper going on there. But that's not the reason you've chosen him as your secret stack, is it?
As a man who's
Well,
also
maybe it is.
growing some salt and pepper himself, maybe it was an influence. No, so again, it's really important to look into over-unders and fantasy points allowed. So taking a look at fantasy points allowed to the quarterback and wide receiver position, the Lions are top 10 in both. Their defense has taken a massive downgrade this year, which is really interesting to see. Marcus Mariota, I mean, he's been top 20 in all 3 weeks he's played. He obviously has a huge amount of rushing upside, which is obviously going to help build that floor. And to me, when I'm looking at the secret stack, I'm more looking for floor than ceiling, because it's more a case of going, okay, if I'm taking points away from my quarterback position, can I try and make sure that I'm getting them elsewhere? So if I'm going to be, we spoke about the Rams earlier today. If you could build a lineup with Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams without Matthew Stafford, and then throw in a value stack at quarterback, that's a nice way to go. Deebo Samuel, his target share rises by 8% in games without Terry McLaurin. Obviously, he's missing this week. He's not been incredible in games with Mariota so far this season, but with Terry McLaurin missing, he did have one game of 6 for 72 and a touchdown. I think there's going to be a huge amount of passing in this game from the Commanders, because the running game has really started to fall off, with Bill really not exploding in the way that some people seem to want him to. Obviously, the depth chart is so thin that I think a huge amount of that target volume is going to be funneled towards Deebo Samuel, and with the potential upside of a less than stellar defense, I would quite like to look into Lions defense specifically against rushing quarterbacks, but not something I had time to do in advance of this. And with the 10th highest over-under on the week, I think it's definitely something interesting to look into.
Yeah, and you're the JCM debate's an interesting one as well. I think a player that people have relentlessly just wanted it to click in. It's really not happening at this point, is it? So
yeah,
I'd love to see a little bit more of that. It's probably the time is gone with the injuries and the age creeping in, but the times of that, was it a wide back Deebo build himself as a little while ago? Yeah, it's going to definitely be a really interesting match. When you're right, the match was perfect for that. You throw players like Mariota as a sort of quarterback who can throw in a big game for you. You go, oh, right, that's happened then. And then I suppose if you get it right and you call your shot right, it can work perfectly. But don't worry, as it's the secret tag. If it all falls apart and neither of them do anything, we will not hold it against you, Lewis, at all. My pick, I'm going kind of route one with this, of looking at a really low priced quarterback based on kind of an injury concern. You hit yours absolutely perfectly for Fantasy Game Day, going under the 10,000 mark and having your quarterback being the cheaper player on there. I've hit the same sort of deal here. So Jacoby Brissett, 4,200, 4,600 DraftKings, much for muchness, and then pretty much bang on for Marvin Harrison Jr. as well. Marvin Harrison Jr. has been disappointing from what we'd hoped for from a fantasy point of view. I really hope that we see him with someone who is adept at passing the ball to him at some point in the near future. Is that going to be Jacoby Brissett? Probably not, but I do like this better for Marvin Harrison than with Kyler. The last outing together, Brissett, 261 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown as well, and that is what he's got in the locker from those that short distance as well. It was the 10 targets for MHJ that kind of really does look potentially favourable in this matchup as well. 7 receptions, 96 yards and a touchdown. Combined, they scored 47.54. Now, this was against a shocking Cowboys defense. The Seahawks are by far a better defensive unit. So this is high risk from that point of view. But combined, they're costing you $9,400 on Fantasy Game Day, leaving you with £5,100 per player. On DraftKings, $9,900, leaving you with just over $5,700 per player. So that means you've got plenty of wiggle room to offset that with some of your bigger plays elsewhere. That's the middle of the pack, fantasy points against quarterbacks and wide receivers, but there was enough of a connection, as I said, in that last outing for me to think this could potentially pay off, although I accept I'm sprinkling quite a healthy dose of optimism onto that as well. How are you feeling about this as a matchup against the Seahawks?
I don't particularly like starting someone against the Seahawks defense right now. I think it's one of the better defense in the league, and particularly, I mean, Jacob Brissett, similar to Marcus Mariota, isn't quite a backup quarterback. They're sort of that quarterback 30 to 40 range where they could start as a bridge or they could be a priority backup, and you can kind of see that line either way. But he through 3 games, so he's played 3 games on the season. Kyler's played 5. The Cardinals have averaged an extra 95 yards of offense per game, an extra 0.8 of a touchdown per game, and an extra 5.1 points. So they have just plain and simple been a better offense with Jacoby Brissett in place. MHD himself, I mean, it was a career high, what we saw from him. 7 receptions in a game, 3 targets on the first drive, also being a career high. So if you would like to see that as a trajectory for him to go off, again, I can potentially see the argument for a blow up. I mean, similar to what I was talking about with Rams 49ers, divisional games do tend to get quite strange. So if there was a team that suddenly pulled it out of nowhere with a backup quarterback and absolutely blew up the opposition, I could see it happening here. And yeah, as you say, with kind of a middle of the pack points per game allowed to quarterbacks and wide receivers, I think it's 12th and 14th, but I can't actually remember. I think it's potentially an idea to take. I know I am supposed to make fun of you for your secret stack,
It's
but
what Ed usually does.
yeah, I don't hate sprinkling it in here and there. I genuinely, I think one of the best ways to get different in DFS is to sneak in that like unexciting stack that, as you say, if it doesn't hit, no one has to know you did it. No one has to know that you had a Jameis Winston lineup in DFS across the end of last season. They just have to know if you win it big. So I don't hate sprinkling it in here and there.
I'm sure you might be a bit of pushback when you get to my bargain basket instead. So I'm sure we can get some disagreement in shortly. I'm going to go with my captain pick. So if you're playing a fantasy game day and you're making that captain selection, I'm going to go with mine first here because yours is the correct choice when it comes to captain this week. I'm going route 1. So I'm going with Amon-Ra St.Brown. In that match against the Commanders, we're giving it the 6th most fantasy points per game, 2 wide receivers. It's more route 1 than normal. Usually we try to go a little bit low with our captain picking away from the obvious ones, but sometimes you just can't look away from an elite player in a great matchup, and that's what this is this week. He's expensive, obviously, but he's wide receiver 3 overall. He's averaging 7.4 receptions per game, 80 yards per game, lower than expected, but he always has it in for a multiple touchdown week. So with the Commanders giving up the 6th most fantasy points per game, 2nd most passing yards to wide receivers, and 4th most touchdowns to wide receivers, I think this is set to be a big outing for St.Brown this week. There is no such thing as a guarantee. We know this, but this is pretty close for me. So I will be happily trying to sneak in Amon-Ra St.Brown into a couple of captain lineups. Obviously, in fantasy game, you get those double points, so you could get a really good return on that. Now, as I said, your next pick for captain next is absolutely the correct one. But how do you feel about St.Brown this week in that matchup?
Yeah, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is a player I always tend to be quite wrong on, because I never, in my brain, again, this is a feelings thing rather than an actual evidence-based thing. I never seem to see him in that elite class of wide receiver when I'm looking for a potential captain pick, but looking across the season to date, absolutely has been worthy of that. Currently wide receiver 3, and has had 3 straight games of double-digit targets. I mean, in the game before, it was 9 targets as well. So, in a wide receiver-friendly matchup, and somewhere that we anticipate them scoring a lot of points, and especially with Jahmyr Gibbs actually disappointing a fair amount this season, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is a nice way to go, and I can't anticipate him being that hotly owned as a captain pick.
The next pick you've gone for captain said it is the correct choice. It is going to be the RB1 on week 10 and the fantasy player number 1 overall. I am certain it is Mr. Derrick Henry.
Derrick Henry. So sometimes with my captain, I'll try and go not that far down the beaten track, but trying to get someone a little more under the radar. And I think Derrick Henry's only had 20 PPR points in one game so far this season. But I think this could be the get right spot for him. Obviously, first of all, it's starting to get colder. We're starting to get towards the end of the year where Derrick Henry tends to heat up. Minnesota rank 8th in EPA per play allowed against the pass and 21st against the run. So they are an easier team to run on than to pass on. If you take a look, and this comes courtesy of Tom Strachan, if you take a look at the success rate on different types of runs, the Vikings allow the 4th highest success rate on zone runs, where Derrick Henry is 5th in yards per carry and 8th in success rate. So everything seems to be setting up quite nicely for this to be a nice spot for him to get right. We know that he heats up as you get later into the season, especially coming off the bye, and especially with Lamar Jackson healthy as well. But one of the crucial things for me is trying to find a slightly cheaper choice and a slightly lesser owned choice that still has the potential to explode. Obviously, naturally, you're going to be looking at players like JSN, like CMC, like Puka, but potentially Derrick Henry, who we know can always explode for a multiple touchdown week, could be a slightly cheaper way of achieving that same balance.
So if you are hungry for fancy points, you can order yourself a whole lot of beef this week with Derrick Henry. And definitely not my words at the bottom, Lewis's own words there. He is magnificent. We know that, on top of all of the rest as well. So yeah, we've not seen the best of Derrick Henry this year, but I think he's a sort of player that, you know, he is such an elite professional in how he prepares, how he goes about his game. We know he's a perfect combination with Lamar being back and looking like he's on his way to his best as well. You just wouldn't bet against him having a phenomenal end to the season and making us forget all of that as well. And I think that price is going to start creeping up as well, because the Ravens have got a more comfortable slate of fixtures coming up compared to I cannot wait for 2 games against the Bengals if Henry does warm up, because he's going to be good for about 90 fancy points a week when it comes to that Bengals defense. We are going to stick with the Ravens for bargain basket pick, and my pick for the bargain basket is Isaiah Likely. Now, this for me, when I'm looking for those players that are towards the bottom end in the pricing, and £2,200 is the rock bottom price when it comes to fantasy game day. You're looking for that player that has the chance to have a big week, but could also maybe get you a safe thing. But at the same time, you're not too worried if it goes high long, because you've not spent a huge amount on that. You have just got to call your shot on a player like Isaiah Likely. We've seen the big weeks, we've seen the down weeks. There isn't always necessarily rhyme nor reason to that. Mark Andrews has been more significantly involved. So the last time I went for a pure call shot with hoping for my Ravens bias to pay off was Justice Hill in week 4, the one good week Justice Hill has had. So I'm hoping my Baltimore senses are right this time too. Lamar's back and fine, which obviously helps. He had 4 targets last week, 60 yards, 9 fancy points. At cost, you'd be reasonably happy with that, to be fair. But if he gets a touchdown, you are feeling so much more comfortable. And a stat that I will hang my hat on so far this season, when it comes to TH touchdown guarantees, I am 7 for 7 so far on this season.
Absolutely elite.
So this is as sure a thing as it gets. I'm giving you, Lewis, the TH touchdown guarantee on Isaiah Likely this week. If I go 8-8, I'm going to retire from making these comments, because I'm already getting carried away with 7. Likely, he is the player, when you're looking at the fact that Vikings seeing 12 most fantasy points games tight ends, there is a real root to this. But you could also have no Isaiah Likely, couldn't you?
Yeah, I think he's really, really, and we've gone for very similar ideas behind us. That you take a look at the fancy points allowed to tight ends, and you can see the breakout spot, but you can also see, like Isaiah Likely, you could easily end up with the sort of 12 to 14 points, or you could end up with a flat out 0. But that is, when you're taking someone at 2,200, and we have been talking through quite a consistent strategy about building in those slightly cheaper options to allow you to get the players that we've been focusing on. That's the shot that you're taking, but that is what wins you slates, by absolutely hitting on those cheap options. So yeah, but also with that TH touchdown guarantee, that has been the most consistent data point of the season so far. 7 for 7, 100% correct. So at this point, data nerds like us are looking at it and going, there's clearly something there. There's clearly some sort of evidence in this because it's 7 for 7 so far.
I'm going to sort myself some lovely little graphic and give myself an award for this, I think, if I go 8-8. Because I will have earned it. Now, we are both completely on our individual brands when we have come to our bargain baskets.
Yeah.
I've gone for a gamble on a tight end 2 on a roster who just has that chance. You've done the same, so we're going to come full circle. Our first feature talking about the Rams 49ers. We said we would come back to the Rams and tight ends. Take us away.
Yeah, in theory, if you're looking at target share across the season, I've actually gone from the Rams tight end 4. Obviously, Terrance Ferguson didn't see a huge amount of work early on into his career, but across the last 3 weeks that he's played, he has seen, 7 targets and has only dropped a couple of them, which is pretty exciting. The main thing about Terrance Ferguson is the Rams have really shifted to a 13 personnel formation, a lot of the time actually taking either Devontae and Puka or just Puka out of the lineup and using a trips tight end formation. Terrance Ferguson will then almost function as a wide receiver, which is kind of the way he was used throughout his time in college as a fantastic receiver. But crucially, he's had 2 catches for over 30 yards in the last couple of weeks. And he's kind of starting to emerge as a slight big play threat. That included a touchdown against the Jacksonville Jaguars as well. I think he is starting to be moved into this offense a little bit more. Would I have a huge amount of comfort in starting him? No, I wouldn't. I think compared to Isaiah Likely, this is way more likely to finish on 0 points. But looking at him as a potential big play threat with Tutu Atwell still out on IR and the Rams needing some explosivity in their offense, Terrance Ferguson is someone you can take a shot on. And especially now we are after the bye for the Rams, so there should be the chance for those rookies to continue to develop. And Sean McVay and Les Snead adore Terrance Ferguson. They've openly said they were going to take him in the first round if they hadn't traded out, which would have been a crazy pick. So I'm glad they got an extra first in the process. But with that draft capital and with that, emergence as a big play threat, there's definitely some touchdown upside here as well, which, to be honest, at 2,200 on game day and 2,500 on DK, that's kind of all you're looking for.
Well, there we go. That is a wander through the week 10 slate for DFS, looking at those pricings for Fantasy Game Day and also DraftKings. Surely some of those picks are right. And people, I reckon we've probably got everything pretty much bang on there, Lewis, if I'm completely honest. I can't see any of those things that are going to go wrong whatsoever. So if people would like more solid gold fantasy wisdom, where can they find you?
You can find me on YouTube at Fancy Pancake or on Twitter at FF_pancake. Loads of fun content coming out on both, including, I do need to do a new episode actually, but my Off the Wire series, where I'm taking a dynasty team that I built entirely off the waiver wire, trying to turn it into a contender. So there's some fun things for you there, along with all your regular waivers, dynasty trades, and all the other business you expect from fancy YouTube channels.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Liz. As always, whenever I finish a show with you, I feel like I've just watched a show myself with the wisdom that you bring to the table. So I feel the much better week 10 fantasy player for having you on. That is all from me, though. That is all from Lewis. We will see you the other side of week 10 with our week 10 review show. So all that remains to say is bada bing, bada bye. And Malcolm, take us home.
You have been listening to the team from TH Fantasy Football. For more content, follow TH_fantasy_NFL on Twitter and Instagram.